Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 17 of Shanalytics. Today, I'm joined by a very special guest. Eric Crocker is here with me today. He covers the 49ers. He was a former cornerback with the NFL and with the AFL. And now you just started working on the Locked On 49ers podcast with Brian Peacock, which, hey, if you haven't checked it out already, check out the link in my YouTube description. You can find all of Crocker's information there. Croc, how you doing today, man? This is kind of a dead part of the off season. We got 2 weeks, I believe, till training camp just today. What have you been up to? What have you been looking at lately?
Yeah, man. I mean, I'm just like everybody else excited for the season to come in. And there are a lot of, good content creators, you as well out there. And we're finding different things to talk about that people want to be interested in. And I think, heading into the season, a lot of topics that you put out there for today, I think are really good topics. So I'm excited to talk some 49er football.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about this today, too. We're going to go through a few camp battles. We're going to focus on Deebo Samuel and Brandon Aiuyk. I know Croc is a huge wide receiver guy, so I want to get his thoughts on everything with them. We'll talk a little Trey Lance also for the people. But if you haven't checked out Croc's stuff already, I don't know why you're here, man. Go check it out in the description below. I have his Patreon down there, his YouTube, the Locked On 49ers podcast like I was talking about earlier. But Croc, why don't we get into the first topic today for the people? And we're, like I said, we're 2 weeks away from camp exactly today. There's going to be some interesting positional battles. And I put this out to you asking if there were two camp battles you're looking at the most. I asked for one on offense and one on defense. So let's start on offense, Croc. What are you looking at the 49ers offense? And once they do get to camp and we see the players practicing, what positional battle are you most interested in?
I think the easy way to go would be the quarterback position, right? I think that's the biggest battle of the entire team. But I'm going to go in a different direction. I'd say the wide receiver 3 position. I think that's a spot there that has been really a polarizing topic throughout this offseason. Fans, media members, everybody trying to figure out who's going to be that fourth target option and that third contributor as a receiver. So that's one thing. I mean, is it going to be Jalen Hurd? Is it going to be healthy and kind of battle back? I know a lot of fans want to see him play well. Will it be Mohamed Sanu? He's the older guy, and I feel like a lot of people are counting him out. But, it sounds like He did a terrific job during OTAs, and we'll see how he continues to kind of grow within whatever role they have for him. And then the other guys, Juwan Jennings, Richie James, I think he has a ton of ability and potential. I think he's been productive every time he's gotten a legit opportunity. So I'd say the wide receiver 3 battle, not super important, especially in the 21 heavy, personnel team, but having 3 receivers on the field and see how they do. I think who's that third guy? I'm excited to see that.
Yeah, and just touching on that next pass catcher, like you're talking about after the Kittles, the Aiyuks, the Deebos, the big hitters. I think Dwelly is an interesting guy, but like you were saying with wide receiver 3, I think people could argue 5-6 different guys right now for that position potentially. The 49ers, I wouldn't say they have the best wide receiver league in the room necessarily, but it's a really crowded room at that 3, 4, 5 spot, like you mentioned. And even another guy like Travis Benjamin, a guy who took off all of last year, is another guy who could potentially contribute for the 49ers in that sense. So I think that wide receiver 3 position is really interesting. And specifically, I want to see if maybe the 49ers have a move left in them, if that's what they're going to go after, if another wide receiver makes sense with the loss of Kendrick Bourne, because the main thing that I saw when looking over some of the stats from last season is how many targets the 49ers are missing from 2020 and how many guys are missing on that list. So the 49ers are going to have to give someone the ball. And I think you're right. That wide receiver 3 specifically, it's going to be super interesting to see who fills that role.
Yeah, I think you definitely brought up some key topics there, and missing Kendrick Bourne. I think that was a guy who they knew he was going to be there week in, week out. He was productive in the role that was for him. Being a 35 to 40 catch guy a year, that's typically kind of what you want from your fourth option. I think Kendrick Bourne did that extremely well, as well as being probably 49ers' best red zone threat over the last couple years as well. So I think that's something that gets a little overlooked. But yeah, man, I'm excited to see kind of what happens, how that whole thing really plays out. Mohamed Sanu, man, I'm gonna keep an eye on him. I feel like there's really a lot of people kind of counting him out.
Yeah, I feel like the two guys people have kind of completely glossed over in some ways is Mohamed Sanu and Richie James Jr. I feel like those are two guys who everyone seems like they just kind of forgot about them this offseason, where I feel like, given the right game, given the right situation, those guys could really succeed in the 49ers offense. And I think specifically with Sanu, like I don't like to buy into all this stuff too much, but hey, you see him working out with Trey Lance a lot. I'm not saying that that's going to be the end all be all, but it certainly won't hurt him when Trey Lance is the eventual starter. And for me, really quick, I just wanted to touch on this. While I think Aaron Banks will be the starting right guard, I'm interested to see how that's going to play out in training camp specifically. I want to see how the 49ers handle that. And I specifically want to see how he fits into this run scheme, because we know how well he did in pass protection at Notre Dame specifically. I think he only allowed like 2 sacks or something like that. So I know you broke down his film. How do you see him fitting in that Kyle Shanahan running scheme? Because I feel like that's the biggest question with Aaron Banks right now.
Yeah, definitely talked about it on Locked On 49ers with my co-host, Brian Peacock. And the one thing that stood out to really both of us was he doesn't have the ideal movement skills that you would assume Kyle Shanahan and that offense would covet, right? Like a lot of the guys that they've had have been these lighter, kind of leaner guys that are able to really move extremely well in space. And he's not really that. He's more of a guy that you would see along the Pittsburgh Steelers offensive line, just big kind of maulers, right? And I heard Kyle Shanahan, those guys say, they're looking for skill set, right? Like even though a guy maybe isn't the weight, from 6'5", 305 pounds, what we kind of seen from a lot of the 49ers linemen, but they're like, well, we covered the skill set. But even then, looking at his skill set, I'm like, no, like he's hella big and he's 350 pounds or whatever it is. And I feel like he moves like somebody like that. Like we're not talking about Trent Williams, the way he's able to move out there in space. So I'm definitely interested and intrigued to see, how he fits with what they want to do, because I thought if there was one area where he kind of struggled, it was being able to, move, reach blocks, get out in space. I saw a screenplay where he just couldn't get there. I saw a guy make a move on him in space when he was just in a stationary kind of blocking position when he was getting into his pass set. And the dude kind of just got him and he just like reached out and grabbed him and held him. So like, and I mean, they didn't throw the flag, but just watching and evaluating him, I was like, you know what? I feel like that's an area where he definitely can improve at. So if he improves on being able to move in space, I think there's definitely something there.
And just real quick, my last question on Banks would be, and I kind of heard you talk about this a little bit already, so I'm not too unfamiliar with this, but I kind of heard you talk about this, how you think Kyle could protect a guy like Aaron Banks and maybe not put him in too many positions where he's going to be asked to do too much. So do you think that's kind of going to be the situation where they'll give him more and more responsibility the more comfortable he is?
I think all coaches, they want to find out first and foremost, like, maybe it looked a certain way, but how has he improved on that? Maybe try to show him areas in OTAs or heading into training camp. Like, look, we like you doing this, this, and this, but you really need to improve on this. And I would assume that is his movement skills. So if he can just get a little bit lighter on his feet, get a little bit better moving out in space, and then him really work and focus on that aspect of his game. And I'm pretty sure Kyle Shanahan, those guys told him, look, we want you to do this so we don't have to scale back on what we want to do, or even have to, not have you start, at right guard, right? Like we want you to take control of this position, but we need to improve in this area so we can run our offense the way we want to run it efficiently. I can see them doing something like that, especially if he improves. I think it'll all work out.
Yeah, and I'm specifically gonna love to see how they're gonna use Aaron Banks in the preseason. It'll be really interesting. And just before we get into our next topic, everyone's loving seeing you in the building, Croc. Shout out to you, man. I really do appreciate you coming on today. Everyone, again, go check out all of Croc's stuff if you haven't already. But Croc, the next thing I brought up to you and the next topic I did want to talk about was on the defensive side of the ball. Are there any positional battles you're looking at there specifically?
Yeah, really, I would say cornerback. That's probably the main one. You have Emmanuel Mosley there, and I remember at the end of last year, them, electing to play Akilla Witherspoon over Mosley on the outside, when Mosley came back and he was healthy enough to play special teams, but they didn't play him on the outside. And I at the very least thought he'd play in the slot because he's somebody that definitely has nickel experience with the 49ers. He came in and they cross-trained him at both spots, and he was a guy that kind of would fill in that area. But nope, they played Dante Johnson instead. So that was something that was very intriguing to me. And they kind of let me know, like, how much do they believe in this guy? How much do they feel like he's the long-term starter moving forward? So I definitely think it'll be tough for any rookie, whether it's Ambry Thomas or Diamador Lenore, to come in and unseat Mosley in that spot. But I could see a scenario where they say, hey, this is an open competition at the cornerback spot. Mosley, if you do well, obviously it's your job to lose, but you do have these young rookies who are going to be hungry, and if they play well, then you can start to see maybe Mosley start getting reps limited. So that's something there where I don't know how much of a battle it is, but I can see it being something that can potentially play out as a cornerback battle.
So I'm really, I think, to me, I think one of the more worrisome positions I would say is cornerback. I've been speaking about it all off season. I worry about the 49ers investments in the cornerback long term, and they just don't have a lot of players signed at that position for the next 2-3 years. But I guess the question I would have is, with the new DeMeco Ryans defense, which, listen, we don't know exactly what it's going to look like. We haven't seen it yet, but how do you think he's going to utilize cornerbacks, and what kind of pressure do you think he's going to put on those guys?
It's when you hear him talk about it, and he's, we want to be fast, physical, aggressive. We want to be more aggressive, all those things. And it's like, man, every defensive coordinator says that at the introductory meeting or, press conference or whatnot. But I think there is something to that. I mean, I remember hearing it was Fred Warner. I was listening to him on Mayoko's podcast, and he alluded to that, a different style of being aggressive. Kyle Shanahan alluded to it. And it's not to say that Robert Saleh wasn't aggressive, but he was a little bit conservative in a way that he wanted to call defense. Now, when you lose all your pass rushers, obviously you have to blitz more. So I would assume that the blitz numbers were much higher in 2020 than they were in 2019 and before that. But he wants to kind of rush forward, sit back. I mean, we've seen teams be successful with doing it that way. 49ers were successful doing that. One of the best defenses ever, in 2019 playing that way. But it sounds like DeMeco Ryans wants to have, more aggressive style. So whether he incorporates more man coverage, seems like they're starting to switch over to a little bit more cover 4 quarters. 49ers and the Rams were like two of the highest teams in the sense of running quarters on early downs in the entire NFL. So that was something I was interested, maybe going away from that traditional cover 3 or Seattle scheme 3, where it's kind of like a fire zone that a lot of people are used to seeing the 49ers run. So I'm interested to see if DeMeco Ryans even goes a little bit further away from that, because that was something that was kind of, this is the 49ers, but it seems like offenses are kind of, I don't want to say figuring it out, but they're understanding exactly what guys' rules are and how to attack those rules now. And it's up to the 49ers to kind of make that adjustment.
Yeah, and I think that makes a lot of sense to me. The more defenses use those type of the Seattle coverage we've been talking about, especially, I think this is something that became super popular in the last 3 to 4 years. It's going to be something that offenses are going to catch up to, definitely. So I hear what you're saying there. And I guess the position I'm looking at and I'm kind of curious about, I want to ask you about next before we move on to our next topic, is edge rusher specifically. I think Nick Bosa, obviously, the 49ers will get what they get from him. He's coming back from an ACL injury. He might be on a snap count. We kind of don't know about that right now, but I think what will be specifically interesting is that opposite pass rusher who goes on the other side of Nick Bosa. So I guess, who do you think that's going to be? Or do you think it's going to be multiple guys and the 49ers are going to be kind of finding pressure in different ways this season?
I think the easy thing to say is, multiple guys, right? Like, you're not just going to replace that type of production with just one guy, and it's going to be a group effort, and you want each guy to have like 3 or 4 sacks. But no, man, I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's going to be Dee Ford. man. Like, I
Okay.
mean, you know, I'm not writing him off. I know he's someone who missed all last year. Back injuries are always scary, but it seems like he's somebody who's been like rehabbing and working hard to really come back from that. That was one of the guys that Kyle Shanahan said was at the facility during like the whole offseason, just working on getting back healthy. So I'm not going to bet against D4. I know a lot of people are writing them off, man, but that's who I'm going to go with D4 being that rusher. Then also they got Ebicam, and they got him for a reason. You know, they paid him some money to kind of be that guy. I think he and D Ford are, you know, they have similar skill sets in the sense of being speed rushers. So I could see him being another guy too that, you know, ends up getting a lot of reps, being able to rush off the edge as a pass rusher.
Right. Yeah, and I think you know, a lot of people have written D Ford off. I think you're right in that. And Samson Ebukam is a guy who I'm specifically super interested to see how they deploy him this season and what ways they want to use him, because I think, you know, his role is going to be different depending on what team they're playing, depending on what type of quarterback they're going to be playing, because he could definitely do a lot of the spy stuff that we saw him do with Los Angeles and that kind of stuff. But I guess the 2 or 3 names that I was looking at, I just wanted to get your quick opinion on were, you know, guys like Arden Key, Kevin Givens, Zach Kerr. How do you think those kind of additions will affect their line this year? Because it's, to me at least, it seems like they're targeting a lot more interior defensive linemen that they brought in this season.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a strength of the 49ers, right? The interior depth. And you have your starters, Kinlaw, you have DJ Jones, you have Givens. I'm pretty sure he's going to get reps. And then you have the other guys that they brought in throughout this free agency. And it sounds like they're high on Carr as well, or Kerr, which you know, Mo Hurst, you hear that name, Arden Key, those guys, you feel like they're going to be contributors. But I think at the very least, you just have really good depth at that line. And with the 49ers, they've dealt with a lot of injuries, especially to the defensive line. So it's good to see them, you know, really work to have a good amount of depth at that position. Probably would like to see a little bit more edge depth, because that was a place where it seems like over the last couple of years, even 2019, they had some guys dropping like flies. So I think what I would say the most about that is just depth, just quality depth at that position. Not surefire starters, right? Like, they're not just going to be – Mo Hurst isn't going to be a guy that's going to start. But I think when you have Kinlaw, you have DJ Jones, you have Givens, I think you feel comfortable with those guys. And then now we just need some reps from the other guys to be able to spell the main guys.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the main thing. We need those other guys to fill in when, for one reason or another, whether it's a team-specific scheme that they're trying to play against, or there's an injury here or there along the line. They just need to find guys to get some production and to fill in when they need it. And I think that's kind of the most important thing about the defensive line this year. And I do agree with you. I think I would love to see them get another edge rusher, but like we're saying, they already have so much depth along that defensive line. It's not like it's a weakness of their team in any way.
Do you think there's any chance that they end up, you know, bringing in a guy like that's currently a free agent, you know, maybe a guy that could help with some edge depth?
So I think the 2 guys that are really interesting to me are Justin Houston, Melvin Ingram, specifically because I think the way the 49ers are right now, like we've been saying, they would need that true edge sort of guy. They don't need a guy who can play outside, inside, who can play along the defensive line. I think they would need kind of a true edge rusher. And those are 2 of the guys I'm looking at right now. But I would also be okay if the 49ers played this out patiently, maybe waited until the trade deadline or something like that, and waited for the right player to become available. Because to me, with Justin Houston and Melvin Ingram, those are 2 guys the 49ers could have gone after already and figured something out for. So even though I like those guys' ideas, I just feel like the 49ers would have had some movement on those guys in some sort of way. We've heard something by now, but we just aren't hearing that. So I feel like the way they're going to address this, if they are at all in the future, would be a potential trade down the line or someone they could just pick up who became available like that. I don't think there's anyone who is sitting on free agency right now who I think they would get, but that's just me. I do like Justin Houston, though. I think he would be a great addition.
I see one of the comments, and it says we should kidnap Barrett and have him rush opposite Nick Bosa. And the crazy thing is, I remember when Barrett was coming, when he was a free agent, Buccaneers getting him for $5 million. And I was like, dang, man, $5 million, that's pretty cheap. And 49ers, instead of going after Barrett for $5 million for a year, they went and traded for D4, traded second round, gave him all that money. And it looks like Barrett is the one that's kind of winning right now. Tampa Bay won with that whole transaction. So good job by them.
Well, and I think the interesting thing, just touching on this real quick, is the 49ers, they brought in Jason Verrett a few years ago as kind of like a throwaway dart, right? Just a guy they're taking a chance on. So if the 49ers find a player like that who they can get really cheap for 1 year and they just bring him in, whether he's hurt or whatever the situation may be, if it's a guy who has potential, the 49ers should definitely exhaust every option for that. I really like that idea of kind of going after players when they're not at their best, so that you can try and pick them up and hopefully they just get better and better over time. I think that strategy to me is really intriguing. I like that.
Yeah.
The next thing I did want to talk about, though, and kind of the main thing, the title of this video, it's Brandon Aiuyk versus Deebo Samuel Crock. And I know you're a huge wide receiver guy. I think wide receiver is quickly becoming one of my favorite positions in the NFL. So before we get into the specifics with these guys, how would you kind of compare Deebo Samuel and Brandon Aiuyk physically against each other? How they stack up with their measurables.
I'd say just overall, their ability is pretty similar for the most part, even more probably closer than a lot of fans would give it credit for. I'd say the biggest difference is Aiyuk is a little bit more finesse, while Deebo is just a little bit more like pure, like brute strength, powerful. Right. So in the way that he plays, just their styles and which how they play. So I think right away that's the biggest difference. I think when you look at both of those guys, to be honest, like Deebo Samuel too, I think Deebo Samuel has some really good aspects to his game, even route running, and it's kind of overlooked because of how he's kind of been utilized in the Shanahan offense. So he's not viewed or looked at as a great route runner, right? Like how people look at Brandon Aiuyk, like, oh, route runner, Aiuyk, he's terrific at that. But I think Deebo Samuel is just damn near as good with how he is able to run routes and understands leverage and how to attack blind spots and go the other way. And I think, his feet are really good. Again, he does some things with a little bit more power than finesse, but I think that's a really underrated aspect to Deebo's game. And then you look at Aiyuk, and I feel like he's just kind of scratching the surface. He was a guy who played multiple positions at Sierra Junior College. He was recruited by Alabama to play defensive back.
Right.
And, he ended up going to Arizona, obviously, for a couple years and, excelling in his senior year. But I still think that there's a little bit more there in the sense of being like consistent with a lot of the talent that he possesses. So, really understanding how to play faster. I thought last year he did a lot of things, very well. The one thing I don't want to say I was underwhelmed about, but I would like to see him improve on is that after the catch. Now, obviously, we saw the play against Philadelphia where they got the ball to him in space and he did what he did, jumped over a guy. I saw it in your intro. But on a consistent basis, I thought he was pretty regular after the catch. Like that, if there's, when you talk about comparing the two guys, I'd say that's where Deebo, at least last season, at least Deebo has been with the 49ers in Aiyuk's rookie year. Deebo has a big edge and just not just yards after catch, but making guys miss, getting those yards that don't look like they're really there to be had. I thought Deebo excels at that. I think Aiyuk got the yards that you expected him to get and didn't really give you much more than that unless it was blocked up better. So I think that's an area where he can improve, but that would be kind of my long-winded version of a comparison of the two.
So I think that's a great way to talk about those two guys, especially the part that I'm picking up on the most specifically is the kind of the finesse versus, I don't want to say the brutal style that Deebo plays, but it's very physical the way he plays football. It's not like most NFL wide receivers nowadays. So that to me is an interesting dynamic between the two, because I don't think people think of Aiyuk as a finesse sort of guy, even though he really is when you watch him play.
Yeah, he's a little bit more finesse. And I mean, I think when you hear the word finesse, it gives like this negative connotation to it. But nah, he is a little bit more finesse. Like he's not trying to beat you with pure strength and power. But it's not like he's like avoiding contact or anything like that. So he can get better with certain things. I mean, we've seen Deebo have some issues with drops. I remember last year, a pass that Aiyuk had to kind of go down for. The quarterback kind of threw it down low and away in a way to where he wouldn't like get hurt, try to keep him out of harm's way. And the ball kind of popped up in the air and it ended up being intercepted. So, you like to see him improve on certain things like that and just really being consistent with being able to play fast and then also play fast after the catch once he has the ball in his hands.
Yeah, so I guess the other thing, and the question I kind of sent you with these guys, and I'm really intrigued to hear your answer, is that I think, people talk about wide receivers now, but I think there's, a specific difference between a true kind of receiver type and more of an offensive weapon. And, I feel like in the NFL, especially now, you think of more DeAndre Hopkins would be your best receiver in the NFL, but I would argue I think Tyreek Hill is a better offensive weapon than he might be. So I guess how would you compare those two guys in that sense? Because I think people would think of Deebo as more of the weapon, whereas they would think of Aiyuk as more of the pure receiver.
Yeah, Deebo is definitely a weapon. And I think, obviously the 49ers have done a good job of using him as such. Last year, Deebo had more yards after catch than actual yards, which I've never even heard of anything like that before, especially coming from a receiver. Now, he missed a lot of time too, so that probably contributed to it. But just the way they used him, it was just like, we're going to figure out different ways to get the ball in one of our best offensive guys' hands. And they did that a lot. So, it's tough because when you watch Deebo Samuel, it's not that he can't just be a pure receiver. It's just that he has this added value to the way that he plays or the way that you use him. So, I talked about on my timeline DJ Moore. And, I had tweeted out that, DJ Moore is what 49er fans hope Deebo Samuel would be. And I think a lot of fans took that as kind of like a slap in the face towards Deebo. And I'm like, nah, man, Deebo is probably my favorite player on the 49ers. And I love the way he plays. But when you just look at how DJ Moore is utilized, we're talking about a guy who is right around 1,200 yards over the last couple years. And he has a very similar skill set as Deebo Samuel. Their height, weight is right around the same. Deebo is a few pounds heavier. DJ Moore was a guy who was 210 pounds coming out. Their height is about the same, around 5'11". So from that standpoint, they're built similar. Their speed is a little similar. We're more around a 4.43, Deebo 4.48 or whatever it was. But in the way that they play, I think they both play fast. But when you watch DJ Moore, he's utilized all over the field, and he's utilized as more of that pure receiver that you're talking about. But I think Deebo can be used like that too, and I think he wins in that way. We saw it a lot his rookie year, but I think last year is kind of clouding our judgment of what he really is because they used him in such a gadgety role.
Right, and to me, I feel like that gadgety role that you're talking about, that may have been more out of necessity than anything, not because Deebo Samuel can't do all those receiver things like you're talking about, but because the 49ers needed him to be that weapon for them. And
right. I think that definitely is part of it, and just trying to help, a quarterback that might not be as confident and comfortable with what looked to be a bad ankle, most of the time. So, they were just figuring out different ways to get Deebo the ball, maybe not put their quarterback in harm's way until they felt like maybe he was more comfortable just really standing in there and delivering throws downfield. But it seemed like they never kind of got that from him because, he was hurt, came back for a few games, and was hurt again for the rest of the year.
Yeah, and kind of on the flip side of that, when we're talking about Brandon Aiuyk, I think people think of him as more of a pure receiver, but kind of when I dove into the film and when I tried to watch as much Aiyuk as possible, I feel like he's a guy that he doesn't excel, but he is almost just as good as Deebo with all that gadgety type stuff. I feel like, if Deebo went down and they needed Aiyuk to fill that role, I think he would be the guy for the 49ers. So I guess, how do you think Aiyuk excels outside of that receiving? Because I feel like this is a guy that 49ers just need to get the ball in his hands more and get him more touches.
Yeah, I mean, we saw that in his second game, right, against the Giants. His first touchdown was an end around. Right now, he went untouched, but they utilized him in a similar way that they would utilize Deebo Samuel. So, and I think we're seeing a lot of other receivers around the league being able to have that same type of aspect to their game, added element. So now Aiyuk definitely is a guy that can do that. He was a terrific punt returner in college. And I think, being able to just get the ball in his hands and watch him move in space So same thing on end arounds or reverses and different things to get him the ball in space and watch him kind of do his work. I think he does a really good job of that.
Yeah, and there was one specific play I was talking to you about just before we started where it's an end around designed for Aiyuk where the ball actually gets fumbled and it looks like it's going to be an 8, 10, 12-yard loss for the 49ers, but instead Aiyuk picks it up and it's a first down and a 15-yard gain. And I just get excited every single time this guy gets the ball behind the line of scrimmage. I think he needs to get the ball more in that sort of way, definitely.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I want to see him get with like the other receivers around the NFL. And obviously it's too late now, but I would like to see him work with like, hey man, go find Stephon Diggs. Like go find Odell Beckham and Jarvis Landry. Like where are they working out at? Like go work with them, pick their brain. I saw Deebo Samuel do that with Emmanuel Sanders, and obviously like they were teammates for half a season, but go get that like that veteran person in your ears. And last year was Kendrick Bourne that helped him, and that probably helped him a lot. But all right, like now let's take it to the next step. You're Brandon Aiuyk. There are a lot of guys that have eyes on you now. They know who you are. They like you. And if he reached out to those, veteran guys, like I said, some of the superstars, man, they'd be like, yeah, come on, man. And just to kind of be around them, soak up that knowledge and kind of understand different way to do things and how they see the game. I think that's something that could really help Aiuyk take his game to the next level.
Yeah, and to me, Aiyuk is just, an ultra talented guy who I think can just be better and better and better. So I guess we can start with Aiyuk, but for both of these guys, what do you think their ceiling is in the future? For Aiyuk, let's start with Aiyuk specifically. How good do you think he could be in this league, and what kind of impact do you think he could make, 3, 4, 5 years down the line once he fully develops?
Oh man, yeah, I think he can be a guy that's like a consistent 1,100-yard receiver. A guy he starts stringing together 1,000-yard seasons. I don't think anybody would be surprised. I think he does a really good job being able to work all levels of the football field. We watched him be crafty underneath as well with his route running. So I really don't feel like there's anything he can't do. I think it's just more so of getting more comfortable with doing those things, getting more comfortable with his role in the offense, getting more comfortable with whatever quarterback he has. And I think that might have a big thing to do with, how he ends up progressing as well. Are him and his quarterback on the same page? And if you can start to kind of put those things together, I think like sky's the limit for him. I said 1,100 yards. I could be lowballing it a little bit.
Yeah. And then I guess with Deebo on the opposite end, what do you, because I know people worry about the injuries with him, and that honestly, that's just kind of something we can't predict. We can talk about it all we want, but we don't know what's going to happen to him in the future. So I guess with him, if his potential is realized, do you see, I know you described him as DJ Moore earlier. So do you kind of see him as that sort of guy if he has a fully healthy season?
I think, obviously, like you have to have enough balls to go around that everybody in the 49ers already have like a number one target in George Kittle. And then looks like Aiyuk potentially will kind of take that next step, but they're still going to figure out different ways to get the ball in Deebo's hands. And he also gets a lot of cheap yards. So if I think there's a scenario where Deebo, Aiyuk, and Kittle all can go over 1,000 yards just because they also use Deebo Samuel in more of a manufactured touches role. So like, just the little jet sweeps where it's kind of an extended run play, but he gets the reception, he gets the passing receiving yards for that play. And I think there's a way he can kind of cheat his way to being 1,000-yard receiver, even if it doesn't look like the same way that Aiyuk gets his 1,100 yards.
Yeah, I think that's definitely, the difference between them. And just, I wanted to touch on one, because I am an analytics guy. This show is called Shanalytics. So I want to cover a few things with Deebo really quick. You brought up the yards after the catch earlier. I was looking at the yards after the catch per reception leaders in the NFL. Deebo is ahead by a country mile. Like it's not even close. He's at 12 yards after the catch per reception. I think the next guy is at 10 yards. And then if you look at all the players who are even in the top 20, there's 2 wide receivers in there, and Deebo Samuel is one of them. The rest are running backs. So, this guy, like when we talk about him being, I know people use the cliche of a wide receiver in a running back's body, but it's true that the stuff he's doing, it is kind of in that mold. And one other thing I wanted to mention too is Deebo actually led the league last year in average separation per reception, which I thought was super interesting. He had like 4.6 yards of separation per catch that he was getting last year. I think second was like at 2. So, I mean, Deebo definitely shows off all these freaky things where, like, we're talking about him as a gadget guy, like you were saying earlier, but I do think there is that role for him in the future as more of a receiver and getting more balls that way. And like you're saying, while it might not look like your classic receiver stuff, and it's not going to be like, oh, they're going to chuck him the ball downfield every single time, and he's going to get it at the catch point, all that kind of stuff. What Deebo can do with the ball in his hands is electric, and the 49ers know how to use him. And once he's fully healthy and they have all these 3 guys together, they're only going to make each other better. So I think that's going to be really great for the 49ers moving forward.
Yeah, and hopefully they do throw the ball downfield to him. I mean, we saw him as rookie in the preseason. CJ Beathard took a shot downfield, and he had like 40-yard, 50-yard catch downfield. Oh, yeah. So it's like, man, he can do those things, but they just haven't really given him that type of opportunity. And maybe, I mean, we could say, well, maybe that's not Kyle Shanahan's offense, but it sure was his offense when he was with Atlanta.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Yeah, well, and I think the whole thing about Kyle Shanahan's offense too, and we'll talk about Trey Lance here next, but to me, it's more of a function of the personnel and the quarterback rather than the wide receivers on the team. I think, once Trey Lance gets the ball, we'll really see this offense fully unleashed. And I just want to go over a few fan comments really quick. Raymond was saying, hey, Aiyuk is smooth. Deebo is punishing. I agree with that, man. Aiyuk, he is just silky smooth watching him sometimes. It's really exciting. And Tommy, Deebo has set the record for most rushing yards from a receiver in the Super Bowl. I mean, like Croc was saying, the stuff that they do with Deebo, it's awesome. And hey, you just brought up exactly what we were talking about. Jimmy G limits Deebo's ability to be a true receiver. So, well, you know what?
Hold on. I got a tough time with that.
Yeah. I want to end up this topic on this. What do you think about this comment? Because I think a lot of people in the fan base feel this way. Can you dispel that rumor for everybody?
I think he might limit his ability down the field, but in the sense of what Deebo does extremely well, which is kind of, work to get the ball in space, catch the ball, yards after catch. I think Jimmy Garoppolo, that's the way you want to use Deebo, is perfect for that. We go back again. I think we get clouded by 2020 and kind of what that looked like really from both guys. Deebo Samuel trying to get healthy, stay healthy. Same with Jimmy Garoppolo. But 2019, Jimmy didn't have any issues getting him the ball at all levels. Now, they didn't throw the 30-yard passes down, to him too much. And they did try it one time they tried it in against Pittsburgh week 2. Okay. Deebo went up and dropped it. I mean, now he had it. Then when he hit the ground, the ball popped loose. And then they tried it again downfield against I'm drawing a blank. Seattle on Monday Night Football down the right sideline through the go route, and Jimmy Garoppolo underthrew it. Yeah. And I really think if he would have threw it out there, Deebo would have had a nice big play. I think in a big moment, like overtime or something. But aside from that, man, like you look at the efficiency on getting him the ball on slants, on dig routes. Even the kind of the deep crossers, right? We're talking about that climbing dig from 10 to 20 yards, getting him the ball in there and putting him in position to catch and run. I thought Jimmy did that very well. And Jimmy was one of the most efficient quarterbacks in the league in 2019. Again, maybe not being able to utilize the full playbook of Kyle Shanahan, right? I mean, didn't throw the ball outside the numbers very much. Had the least amount of throws down the field with any, starting quarterback. He was like 31st or 32nd in the league. But in the way that they used Jimmy in that offense, he was extremely efficient from that standpoint. So I kind of have to defend Jimmy a little bit there.
Yeah, I think you're definitely right in that way. And hey, he's saying Aiyuk can do what Deebo can do, but in a little less physicality. I agree with this point exactly. I think if like I said earlier, if they needed Aiyuk to fit any role in this offense and they asked him to do any number of things, I feel like this is a guy who's really dynamic in that sort of way, where whatever they ask him to do, man, he could do it. So yeah, I love Aiyuk too. And Ryan was saying, if anything, Jimmy Garoppolo doesn't limit Deebo, he limits Aiyuk. I think this is a point that I don't want to say I agree with fully, but like I think there's definitely an aspect to there's definitely some merit to the idea that that Aiyuk needs to be paired with a quarterback who's a better down the field thrower to really utilize his skill set the most. I think there's some truth to that. And that does kind of take us right into the next topic, Croc, which is Trey Lance. I mean, this is the guy we got to talk about, right? I didn't want to make sure I skipped over him for the people. So first thing I wanted to ask you about, and the way I phrased the question to you when I sent it over to you was, regardless of the 49ers win-loss record at the end of the season, what would you consider a successful season from Trey Lance on the field?
I'm really big on the eye test, right? Like when you look at the 49ers first year, 2017, and it wasn't a great season, but even when the 49ers were 0-9, the eye test told you that Kyle Shanahan is a good coach. Like you could see that the 49ers are extremely competitive. They were staying in games. They had lost 5 straight games by 3 points or less, which was crazy. But you could see, like, you know what? I think this is heading in the right direction. And I think I would take that same approach with Trey Lance. What does it look like? You know, there was a game last year I was watching Tua. I don't even want to try to say his last name, but Tua. And, you know, I was watching the game, and Tua was like 18 for 22 for like 100 yards. And everybody's just like, oh, he's so terrible, right? And you would think like a quarterback that's 18 for 22, like, how is he playing terrible? But like your eye test is saying like there's something wrong here. So when it comes to Trey Lance, that's what I would focus on. Like, what does it look like? More so than the wins, losses, more so than completion percentages and things like that. Like, is he giving you things to really look forward to? Can you tell that he's grasping, what Kyle Shanahan wants him to do? Is he seeing the field well? Is he making throws where we're saying like, well, Jimmy Garoppolo can't make that throw? Is his talent that he possesses showing through? And I think if you see those things, even if he's a 62% passer and the 49ers, you say he starts 10 games and the 49ers go 5-6 or 5-5 in those 10 games. Right. I still think that would be a success because you still have things to look forward to, heading into 2022 season. So that's what I would consider a successful season for Trey Lance. What does it look like? And we're all going to know. We're all going to know if it looks good or if it's like, our 49ers, the Dolphins trying to figure out, should we draft a quarterback? Should we not? If you start having those conversations, then it's kind of ugly.
Yeah, and I feel like that's kind of been the trend with quarterbacks recently. In the past, especially going back 20, 30 years, quarterbacks would sit for a very long time. They wouldn't play it for – I mean, Joe Montana, I don't think he played for his first couple seasons with the Niners. But if you look at this new school of thinking, the way quarterbacks are introduced into the league now, it seems like now more than ever, you kind of know with these guys right away, right, Croc?
Yeah, and I wouldn't even say that you just know right away. You look at a guy like Justin Herbert last year, and the Chargers, they were like their head coach, Anthony Lynn, and maybe that has something to do with why he's fired and whatnot, but they did not want to play Justin Herbert. They were like, nah, not ready. So whatever it looked like in practice, maybe he showed some signs that he can make plays and make throws. I remember watching Hard Knocks, and there was one throw where it was like, wow, like, dang, that rookie made that throw right there. But maybe those things weren't consistent, right? So a lot of times you don't know until the guy actually just kind of gets in there and plays. So a lot of these rookies coming out now, they're coming from offenses in college that, kind of suit them and fit them. And the NFL is able to kind of tailor that same kind of style to for these rookies as well. So I think that's why you see rookies coming in and having more success. But I would say that's a dangerous and kind of like slippery slope to put those type of expectations on any rookie. I always think that a rookie is going to go through learning curves. Now, if he ends up throwing 35 touchdowns like Justin Herbert or whatever he threw, then great, amazing. But I don't think that should be the expectation. I think the expectation should be more so of, hey, let's take the Dallas Cowboys approach, even though Dak Prescott had a tremendous rookie year. But it was, let's lean on our run game. Let's lean on our defense. We're not going to ask our rookie quarterback to do too much until he's ready. And that's kind of the approach I would go. If he even sees the field, maybe Jimmy Garoppolo plays the entire season.
Right. And, I think that's kind of the thing with Trey Lance that took me a little bit to wrap my mind around, especially and when we were all trying to do this quarterback evaluation leading up to the draft and with the trade and everything, right? I think I watched Trey Lance and looked at his stats and said, man, this guy didn't throw the ball a lot. He didn't have a lot of high pass attempts in college. How is he going to translate to the NFL? But then you think about the team he's going to and their 2019 playoff run. It's like, how much is he going to be asked to do? I don't think, to me, I think Kyle Shanahan and Trey Lance it's kind of a perfect marriage in the sense that Kyle is such a run heavy, run focused head coach. And with a guy like Trey Lance, to me, it's more that the run game is going to be so great and so consistent. And they're going to be able to lean on it so much that they're going to create all these explosive pass plays off of it. And, that kind of does lead me to the next thing I want to talk about with Trey, which is how do you think he will fit in with Kyle's offense? And specifically, I guess, I know people have brought up two things with Lance, right? They bring up North Dakota State and all the under center stuff that we see with him, them having a fullback, two backs in the backfield. And then also people like to bring up RG3's rookie season and what Kyle did with him then. So how do you see that offense looking for the 49ers when Trey Lance is the starter?
Yeah, I mean, I think Kyle's going to want to do a lot of the things that we've seen him do, but then now be able to expand on that and add a rushing element to it with his quarterback. So I think you'll see a lot of what he did with RG3. There were times where RG3 was under center, turning his back to a defense and throwing the ball downfield. So Kyle's going to want to do those things with Trey Lance. Obviously, we've seen Trey Lance do those things at college. You brought up his passing attempts, and I know that was a big driving point for a lot of people that were like, look, he's only throwing the ball 18, 19 times a game in college. Like, he can not be a good passer in the NFL. Like, he's a running back. And my pushback on that is, well, Cam Newton only threw the ball 18, 19 times a game in college. Now, they moved the goalposts and say, well, he played at Auburn. Like, you know what I'm saying? But at the end of the day, he did what he was asked to do. He executed at the highest level. I'm talking about Cam Newton. Executed at the highest level, won a Heisman, won a national championship. You look at Trey Lance, although at the FCS level, right? But same thing, executed his offense, did what he was asked to do, executed his offense to the highest level, won college football player of the year, whatever, and won a national title. So there are situations that definitely parallel, obviously different, levels, one playing in the SEC, one not. But who'd say that he couldn't do that in the SEC? And then my other pushback would be, well, Cam Newton. I don't even think Cam Newton is as pure of a passer as Trey Lance, but Cam Newton only threw the ball, 18, 19 times a game in college. And he only really had 1 year at college football. That's one thing that gets kind of overlooked too. He didn't really play as a freshman at Florida, went to Blinn College. I mean, got reps at junior college, and then 1 year at Auburn, then went to league. But rookie year in the NFL, he comes out, throws for over 800 yards in his first 2 games started. So this is a guy who didn't throw the ball much at all in college, right? And then goes to the league, throws for over 4,000 yards as a rookie, throws for over 800 yards in his first 2 games. So I would say, I think sometimes we have to look at, like, what ability does this guy have? Like, don't look at, like, exactly what he was asked to do, but can he throw the ball? Can he drive the ball outside the numbers? Can he throw the ball downfield? Can he drive dig routes, in routes, post routes? Is he smart at the line of scrimmage? He's in control of setting his line protections and calling out mics and all these different things. So from that standpoint, I feel like he has everything that you want. Can he be a little bit more consistent with his accuracy, at least from what he was when he was 19 years old, playing in his first year at North Dakota State? Like, yeah, he can improve on those things. But in the sense of how they kind of match up with, how he fits with Kyle Shanahan's offense, I think he's going to be able to grow in. Again, there's going to be certain elements of it that look a little different. But for the most part, he's going to be able to do everything Kyle wants him to do and be able to expand on it. Again, there are areas where he needs to improve, as any quarterback that's coming out. But the upside is extremely high if he ends up being what you believe he can be. And I think he can do that in Kyle's offense.
Yeah, and I think specifically I want to focus on one thing you're saying, which is that I think, if anything, he'll ramp up to more of a higher volume passing offense and more of that kind of stuff, where I think this team is so talented and with the way Kyle designed his offense that if they want him to throw the ball 15, 16 times a game, if they don't want him to have more than 25 attempts, they don't have to ask him to do, to drop back and throw the ball 35 times or 40 times. They don't need him to do those sorts of things. So I think it's going to be interesting what they ask of him. And I feel like people had this idea in their minds when the 49ers were trying to get a quarterback this offseason that, oh, they're looking for their Patrick Mahomes, right? They look at what they just lost to in this Super Bowl. They're trying to replicate or get their own version of that. But to me, when they did select Trey Lance, when they made all the moves they made this offseason, it seemed like a total buy-in into the running game more than anything else. And I feel like Trey Lance is, like you said, he can do a lot of the things within that offense already, but then he can elevate a ton of other things too. And he can create so much off-schedule things, and he has so much potential in that area that, man, it's hard to pass up on. And specifically, I kind of want to ask you about this. I don't think the passing offense is going to be too dissimilar, at least at first, with that shift from Jimmy to Trey. So I feel like, a lot of those Jimmy gimmies that we see, that sort of stuff, that short yardage stuff. I mean, I saw Grant talk about this in practice, that he's seen this in practice, that Trey Lance is a check down guy, that he's not, necessarily going to be the biggest risk taker in that way. So I feel like he's not going to be put in the worst position, like you were saying, that what they ask of him isn't going to be too much for Trey, especially in his rookie year.
Oh, real quick, I got to use the restroom real quick. All right,
no worries,
give me 1 second. You can pull me backstage.
No worries. All right, well, yeah, everyone, I just wanted to answer a few of your questions really quick, see if there's anything you guys want me to talk about. Let's go in the comments real quick. Croc will be right back, everybody. I'm just going to scroll up. I'm going to read some of your comments I was missing earlier. My issue, okay, Raymond saying my issue with Jimmy is his availability and decision making. His availability leads to losses when he's hurt, and his decision making is questionable, to say the least, at times. I agree, Raymond. I think, it's so tough with Jimmy because on the one hand, there's all these fans who will tell you that, oh, if Jimmy had just stayed healthy, if Jimmy was just fully healthy through 2018, 2020, and he never got hurt, that 49ers wouldn't even think about moving on to another quarterback. But listen, to me, if that was how they view Jimmy Garoppolo, if this is the lens they saw it through, why would they go and trade up for Trey Lance? I mean, they had Mac Jones sitting right there at 12. And listen, I know it's not as easy as it's just saying it like that, and it's easier to say it in retrospective, but really, if it was just about Jimmy Garoppolo's injury history, they would have found a way to get another quarterback at a lot less steep of a price to replace Jimmy Garoppolo, who is more like him. So to me, they had the Jimmy Garoppolo replacement sitting right there for them with Mac Jones, and they had that opportunity and they didn't take it. So I just don't buy the idea that the only reason that the 49ers are getting rid of Jimmy Garoppolo is because of injuries. To me, it doesn't make any sense. And hey, we got Croc back, guys. I'm going to bring him back in. Man, hey, everyone, people are saying some stuff in the comments. Hey, things happen, man. No worries.
Hey, listen, I drink a gallon of water a day. So it's like, it's hard for me to go an hour without having to use the restroom.
No, I hear you, man. You got to keep the fluids running. I was just, I brought up a comment real quick, and we can move on to the next kind of topic after this. But, people have brought up this idea, and some people have been talking about it more recently, that injuries are the only reason the 49ers are getting rid of Jimmy Garoppolo. And that if Jimmy was just healthy, that the 49ers, they wouldn't have done what they did this offseason. But to me, I call BS on that, because Croc, they had the Jimmy Garoppolo replacement sitting right there at 12 overall with Mac Jones. So why would they have gone up and traded all the draft capital in the world to trade for a quarterback who's so different from Jimmy Garoppolo? That's where I question that line of thinking.
I do think that the 49ers, I feel they would not have done this if he had stayed healthy. Now, that wouldn't make it to where your coaches aren't dreaming of having this better, more special, talented quarterback. But I strongly believe that if Jimmy Garoppolo was healthy, they'd be at the very least a wild card team every year for the most part. Like, he does well enough to where you definitely can, you can win with him. So that part's not an issue. But I would say, man, once you have that opportunity to upgrade, Jimmy Garoppolo has given you the reason, right? It's like, well, you can't stay on the field. Like, we don't want to have to upgrade from you, but you can't stay on the field. So now it's like, hey, I get a chance to get a guy that I feel like takes this offense to higher heights. And I think that's the reason why it's like, well, we don't wait for Mac Jones. It sounds like with everything that Kyle is saying, he liked Mac Jones, but clearly he wanted even more than what Mac Jones was able to give him. And it is fun. It is fun thinking about, I know you were talking about kind of some of the things that the ways you could utilize him and whatnot, but it is fun knowing that now in the red zone, teams have to play 11 on 11, right? You're not just playing 10 on 11 where you have an advantage. Now we have the advantage in the numbers game. Now we have the advantage in run pass options, right? Where you have 3 different options. I can hand it off to the running back, I can keep it myself, or I can run down the line and dump it out to Deebo Samuel and let him run it in. You have all these different things now that can really make your offense even more explosive and more innovative. I think when people look at Kyle Shanahan in this offense and you see a lot of other teams utilizing this offense around the league, talked about the cover 3 and people starting to kind of figure it out. Well, seems like right when people are maybe starting to figure out Kyle Shanahan's style of offense that he runs, or the Shanahan's offense, Kubiak, some of these other guys, Stefanski, you see running around the league, all of a sudden the 49ers pivot. And It's like, all right, you guys thought we were going to stay this way. Now I'm going to give you something else to worry about. And not just something else to worry about, but I still can do all the other things I was doing before that made my offense successful. And I think that's what makes it really exciting, having a guy like Trey Lance.
Yeah, and to me, the red zone potential is off the charts. I feel like that's one thing that I don't want to say Kyle hasn't done well enough, but I feel like that's, to me, a big area of improvement with switching from Trey Lance to Jimmy Garoppolo is that threat that he offers, like you're talking about. And specifically, like I saw Rich Madrid bring this up on Twitter and a few different clips where he's showing RG3 have these zone read options, right, in the red zone. And just, gosh, if that's Trey Lance running that zone read instead of RG3, and it's the 49ers weapons that they have now where all 3 of their main receivers can catch the ball, they can run with the ball, they can get jet sweeps, get them in different ways. It's really exciting, and it just, to me, makes life easier and easier for Kyle Shanahan. So
not just Kyle, it's going to make life easier for the running backs as well. Imagine now on a zone read or read option, and now the defensive end can't crash down. Now a linebacker can't crash down. You end up holding the backside of the plays, and if they do make a mistake, your quarterback can scamper for 20 yards, easily. So that's the thing too, where Raheem Mostert, Trey Sermon, like those are guys that are going to benefit from having a guy like Trey Lance in the backfield as well, as did Alfred Morris, who ran for 1,600 yards as a rookie, while having the RG3.
Yeah. And kind of the last thing I wanted to talk about with Trey Lance, and we can hit on this really quick, which is there anything that I and I phrase this as, is there anything he'll struggle with? But I guess for me, is there anything you're looking at him, from 2019 and what he's going to look like in the 49ers? What specific things are you looking for him to improve at and get better at, and what do you want to see from him?
I'd say just his consistency driving passes, and we're talking about that intermediate range where I thought that Jimmy Garoppolo excelled, being able to throw in the tight windows. Can he improve on those things? Again, he has the ability to do it, but doing it at the NFL level where things are moving much faster than they were at the FCS level, that's something where he could potentially struggle with. So, just seeing what does that look like, right? When he does turn his back to a defense and now he has to kind of really quickly fire in a slant or a dig route. Is he seeing the underneath coverage, the linebackers dropping back and knowing, well, I can't go there and I have to now go over here. I've seen him do some of those things in college, right? I mean, there were a lot of times where he's at North Dakota State, man. We know, like, that's the most dominant team in the FCS level. So where they were with him, and they were with Carson Wentz. They weren't last year. They lost to Sam Houston in like the first round of the playoffs. So Trey Lance definitely made a difference there. But I did see times where he would drop back, maybe play action, look there, oh, it's not there, okay, and still fire off a deep out route from the far hash while seeing it late. So he has all this ability. Now, can you be consistent with it and do it at the NFL level? And NFL coaches, they're going to look at his film in college, see where he was. Obviously, I think 2 years later, he's probably not even the same guy. You would hope that he has improved. But even then, they're going to start to try to take away the things that he wants to do most, What did NFL teams start doing with Jimmy Garoppolo? Like, all right, you don't want to throw outside the numbers. You want everything to be inside the hashes. So we're going to start to kind of condense our defenses and make life a little bit tougher on you. And sometimes Jimmy Garoppolo did well. Sometimes he didn't see the underneath defenders. All right. So they're going to start trying to do those things with Trey Lance. What's the counter to that? And, can he improve on, he's a good outside thrower, but driving those throws over the middle, that's what I want to see.
Yeah, and I think, I have it in my notes right there in terms of things he struggled with is that intermediate passing. And I think you're right. The consistency thing to me, it's the biggest thing. You just want to see that guy get more consistent with his throws.
Yeah. And you would hope that he does. Obviously, like, we see the workout videos, we see the work that he's been putting in. Like, all of that is to improve on those things, right? Like, how do I get better at it? Well, reps. Wasn't able to get reps during the season this year, so I had to get reps during my training, try to simulate different looks and movements. I see somebody in the comments getting more comfortable rolling out, making throws to his left, throws to his right, getting comfortable with those type of things. And it looks like he will be. A lot of that has to do with mechanics. So the more that he works on those things and improves those things, we won't see the one hop on a rollout like I saw, a couple of times in college, those type of things, or just like random misses on the move. So big time ability. I don't think there's anything that he can't do. Now it's just being more consistent with a lot of things that he can do.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that point. I feel like that is the biggest thing with him. He has all the ability in the world. He's just got to put it all together now. That's the most important thing. And this is a great rookie class to me for the 49ers. I think I specifically those first 3 picks, and I talked about this earlier, them kind of just fully buying into that running offense, that bruising style that it seems like Kyle wants to play more of. Is there any rookie that you're looking at specifically who you think could have the biggest impact in 2021 outside of Trey Lance?
Oh, man. Again, this is kind of a cop-out, but Trevor Lawrence, man, and I'm excited to watch him because he's been pegged as, like, godly, right? Like, right. I haven't seen this, and I know everybody talks about, the best prospect since Andrew Luck. I remember Andrew Luck coming out. I don't remember, like, just the big time hype like that. I wasn't like as deep into it. I was still playing at that time, I believe. So when was he drafted? I think I was still playing at that time.
Oh, I think Luck was, I believe, 12. It was 2012.
Yeah, see, I was still playing football. So, I wasn't like as deep into the stuff as I am now. But, that's what I want to see. Like, are you going to live up to that hype? Because I'll tell you this. I saw some things with his game. I remember tweeting out before last season. I had tweeted out that I'm like, man, like, he hasn't really impressed me as much as a passer. I was like, I think he's a better runner than he is pure passer. And that was one thing that shocked me, how well of a runner he is, because nobody talks about that, right? And they don't talk about Trevor Lawrence as a runner. Everything is him. Oh, he's just this can't miss prospect. But I was a little underwhelmed with sometimes the way the ball came out of his hands, the contested throws that he was making, throwing things, leading guys out of bounds. And there were a lot of things that were a little weird. That's not to say that he's not a terrific prospect, but they've made it seem like he's
a slam dunk, right?
He's a slam dunk. And I saw things that were a little alarming. So I'm curious to see, does he play to the level that a lot of people think? And if he does struggle, it's like, well, of course, because a lot of things he kind of struggled with a little bit in college. Now, some people blame the offensive coordinator. You look at a lot of the numbers. You said you're an analytics guy. They were talking about, him being one of the least accurate guys at certain levels of the field, especially when they compare it to Justin Fields, Zach Wilson, those guys. And that was weird to me too. Like, I'm watching Justin Fields. Like, I watched a lot of Trevor Lawrence too. And I had a hard time understanding how you can say Trevor Lawrence is better than Justin Fields. And I don't even know where. Like, you would have to show me, like, is he a better deep ball thrower? No, I didn't think so. Does he have a bigger arm? No, I didn't think so. Is he more athletic? No, I don't think so. Like, so it's like, I struggle to kind of feel. So that's what I'm kind of rambling on. But I'm excited to see Trevor Lawrence because he's been pegged as this can't miss prospect. And while I do think he's tremendous, and I would have taken him probably number one, maybe Justin Fields. I love Justin Fields a lot. I'm not buying all the way into the hype that's kind of put on him.
Yeah, and I think the thing with Trevor Lawrence too is, this is a guy who went from, and this happens with all number one picks, but this is a guy who's a high level winner who's going to go to one of the worst franchises in the NFL. Let's just be frank about it. He's not going to be put in the same position he was in college. And one comment I saw, Croc, and I want to get your opinion on. I think I saw it from Chris Sims specifically when he was going over his quarterbacks. He said, with Trevor Lawrence, he didn't necessarily really see him improve as a passer from his freshman year on, and that, how much better did he get from that national championship freshman Heisman season when he did all these incredible things?
I think a lot of it was just what that did, right? I mean, he had already been like this can't miss prospect coming out of high school, right? One of the best between him and Justin Fields too, but one of the highly rated quarterbacks coming out of high school ever, right? So you have that. Then you come in and you replace Kelly Bryant, who had played in, I believe, a national title game or a playoff game just a year before. I think they got smashed by like Alabama or whatever.
Right.
And then you come in, you replace him like midway through the season, and you lead Clemson to a national title game, and they destroy Alabama. And you outplayed Tua, who a lot of people were going, tank for Tua. He was that whole thing at that time. So you had that whole thing happen, and I think that's when it was just like boom, like just the hype, the level of expectations were so high that I don't even think that there was anything he could do to kind of come down from there. So I did think it kind of flattened off. I think a lot of people were looking at, well, if he's this good now, well, he's only going to get better. And I think in their heads, they just every year assume, well, he's just better. He's just better. And I thought it kind of flattened off a little bit. Not to say that's not good, but I just thought it flattened off a little bit. And I don't know. He didn't get nitpicked like a lot of other guys. He has just loopy throwing motion. Nobody mentioned that. They want to mention Trey Lance maybe dropping the ball a little bit. They want to talk about Justin Fields and his kind of bringing the ball here. But nobody talked about Trevor Lawrence and him bringing the ball way down here to come up here. And I'm not saying he's a bad prospect. And I'm just saying that there were a lot of things that people weren't pointing out with him that they definitely were with other guys, and they just made him a clear-cut, just the most amazing prospect. So I can't wait to see him. And not to say that I'm wishing any bad on him or anything like that, but just from the standpoint of like, is he what they say? And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm missing something to the extent of, how they hype him up.
Yeah. Well, and I think, hey, it'll be interesting to see that Urban Meyer, Trevor Lawrence combination. I'm an FSU guy, so I'm not going to speak very highly on Urban Meyer. In fact, don't get me talking about him. I'll probably say some out there stuff. But I mean, let's be real with Trevor Lawrence. Like with what you're saying is that he came out and proved so much early on that, man, it's kind of hard to top that. Like you were saying, and it's not a bad thing that he may have plateaued or stayed at that consistent level, but man, it is. I would imagine it's hard to impress people even more when you come out and you're that successful that quickly,
Right. And I hope that's not what I'm doing. I don't want to be that guy, but yeah, I mean, it's just it's interesting, man. And I'm curious to see it. And I want to see, like, is he just that much better than Trevor Lawrence, even with what it looks like? And some of it can be situations that guys go to, but I think Justin Fields went to a terrific situation, for him. He's coming into Bears organization that has pretty solid structure with the way the team is built, good weapons and everything around him. So that's going to be something where I feel like he's in a good spot. Aside from his head coach coming out and saying like Andy Dalton is their guy, I'm like, all right, that's weird, but all right.
Yeah, Kyle Shanahan's not even saying that right now. Like he's not even saying like, oh yeah, Jimmy Garoppolo's our guy, no question. Like there's no way that Trey Lance would ever start. Kyle's kind of left the door open, which I think, like you're saying, it's interesting that Matt Nagy didn't do that. Have that same approach with Justin Fields, where it's like he could win it, but he isn't the guy yet. There's a big difference between the two.
Yeah, I think Kyle Shanahan did a great job with that whole situation where it's like, hey, we're not going to put any pressure on him right now. Jimmy Garoppolo is our guy until Trey Lance gives us a reason for him not to be the guy. And if Trey Lance, progresses the way that we feel like he can and that we would like to see him do, then yeah, it can be a quarterback competition in camp. But until then, we're not, we're basically not even putting that type of pressure on their rookie quarterback. Hey, just learn at your pace, do the things, and if everything comes together and we're like, okay, man, he's ready to go, then it'll be a competition. I think that's the best way to do it. I don't care for how the Bears did it with just saying Andy Dalton is our guy. Like, why? Like,
yeah. It's like that guy. He came in as a free agent, and I know Andy Dalton's proven a lot in his career, but I just we like we talked about earlier. There's so many young quarterbacks who are playing so early on. To me, it's a little dismissive to just be like, oh yeah, there's no way that he's going to play at all right away. That just doesn't make sense to me. And Raymond kind of brought up this point with Lawrence. He said he's a baller, but let's not forget that he was coming from the same school as Watson, and there's a lot of people who've been successful behind him. I don't know if I buy into that as much. I think to me, it's kind of going back to what Croc was saying, which is that he proved so much early on. It's like, man, people just wanted more and more and more from that guy, and they assumed he was getting there. But like you were saying, once you really break it down, it's, how much has he improved? How much has he gotten better? And specifically at the NFL, I think we'll get the answer to a lot of those sort of questions. And we're going to get into our last topic here. Croc, I appreciate your time. You've been very gracious with it. I just want to say real quick, Jay in the Base saying, what's up? Hey, I'm going to be on Jay in the Base channel later tonight at, I believe, 9 p.m. Eastern. So everyone go check that out. I'll throw the link out on my Twitter later today. But Croc, this is the last topic I wanted to ask you about. And this is a topic I'm super interested in. I asked Vish about this a couple weeks ago. He had some really interesting comments on it. And as a former cornerback yourself, I wanted to ask you, the modern NFL, with kind of the way things are changing in the league, not just scheme-wise, but even with the rules and just what the league is doing, do you think coverage is starting to become more important than pressure? And do you think we've passed that threshold yet? Or do you still kind of fall into that line of thinking that a lot of people do, which is that, hey, the most important, positions outside of quarterback are those lines, that offensive line or that defensive line? Where do you fall on this issue?
I didn't play in today's era, so it's kind of hard for me to kind of compare when I played, not even 7 years ago, 6 years ago, and obviously before that. But a great pass rush was my best friend. So I just look at it from that standpoint where, I can cover extremely well for, the first 3 seconds. But if that pass rush isn't getting there and I have to start covering longer than that, then I can end up looking stupid. So no matter how good I am or how confident I am or whatnot. So I'm always going to lean in the sense of what I would build first. I would build defensive line. Now, I'm also the person that says I'm not going to reach for a position and prioritize this guy over another guy if I have this guy just much higher, right? So if I'm coming out and there's, I have a chance at Kinlaw, and I know I want that space-eating defensive tackle, but there's Jalen Ramsey there, and I know what he can do. Like, well, Ramsey is higher on our board. He's the better prospect. I'm going to go with Ramsey over Aiyuk. Over Kinlaw, even though Kinlaw is possibly more of a need. So, yeah, that's kind of how I look at it from that standpoint. But if you're just saying all things even, I'm going pass rush. If we had a draft and I could draft Jalen Ramsey, and I have to say him because he's probably my favorite corner in the league, but I can draft Jalen Ramsey or Aaron Donald, I'm taking Aaron Donald. You know what I'm saying? Like, give me the guy that's gonna make life uncomfortable for the quarterback.
Yeah, and I think, listen, I think you brought up some great points. I'm not even going to refute you on this. I do want to bring up the analytics angle, though, because like I talked about, I'm an analytics guy. And if you guys check the description, I linked a PFF article below where, this is kind of the genesis of this whole discussion, talking about pressure versus coverage and kind of what matters more. And something interesting that they picked up on, which it made a lot of sense to me when they talked about it this way, was that I think this is 2018 the year I'm referring to, is that when they looked at how teams had utilized passing versus run on first, second down, stuff like that, they found that now in today's NFL, teams are actually passing more on first down than they are running the ball. And if you look, numbers are higher and higher for second downs and third downs. And whereas the old attitude used to be in the NFL, get to 3rd and 4, get to 3rd and 5, 3rd and 6, and then your quarterback's going to drop back and pass the ball. A lot of teams now are just saying like, hey, no, we're going to get a first down even before then because we're going to be aggressive with how we attack defenses. And when they expect us to be running the ball, we're going to be passing the ball. And when they expect us to be passing the ball, we're going to be running the ball. And kind of one thing that PFF talks a lot about, and the interesting thing to me that I hung on the most was they talked about, you touched on this earlier, so I'm not going to refute your point, but their angle was that if you have a below average pass rush that, you could survive with that, but that essentially if you can't cover, if you can't cover at all and your DB struggle, then you're more likely to be hurt by a big explosive play rather than a pass rusher who can't get home. So I guess, what do you think about that angle with it? Because I don't know where I fall on this, but I would say I'm somewhere in the middle, but I understand what they're saying, but kind of going back to what you said earlier, it's that if you do have your pass rusher who gets to the quarterback, it doesn't matter what the coverage is doing 3, 4, 5 seconds after the play.
Yeah. Oh, hold on one second.
No worries, man. No worries. I gotta check the comments real quick. I want to see what everyone's saying out here. Yeah, you guys are right. Yeah, one pass rusher can definitely make the difference. I mean, okay, so we're talking about Ambry Thomas. You're saying that he could replace, and you can see Lenore replacing K'Wan Williams. I'm not as high on those guys, but kind of getting back to what I was just saying, Croc. What do you think about that idea that maybe with the way the NFL is going, that coverage is becoming more and more important than it has ever been?
Yeah, so to kind of talk about, average secondary versus pass, all that stuff, I'll go back to the 2011, 12, 13, 14, 49ers, where you look at Terrell Brown, and I know there was Carlos Rogers, but you had other guys too, like, Tremaine Brock, obviously Deshaun Goldson and those guys. And I think the pass rush, not saying that those guys weren't terrific. I think they played exceptionally well on the back end. But I do think that they were, in a sense, elevated by a main pass rush. So that quote-unquote average secondary that might be prone to maybe giving up an explosive play, you see that far less when you have a pass rush that's consistently getting after a quarterback. So I'm still going to lean towards quarterback because I think now, we look at Deshaun Goldson was an all-pro, right? Like, I don't know if he was an all-pro without having Justin Smith, Arlen Smith, and all those guys up front, Ahmad Brooks and Ray McDonald and those guys. So I'm still going to lean towards pass rush just for that very reason. I think a great pass rush elevates what your secondary looks like and maybe hides some deficiencies or some flaws that they may have.
Yeah, and I think to me, the argument isn't, and I know PFF brings it up this way that, coverage might be more important than pressure. To me, it's not about that necessarily. I think it's more just that with the way the NFL is going, with, like I said, the rule changes, how teams are attacking defenses, and also just with how many quick passes there are on first and second downs now, coverage is becoming more important than it has ever been. And I think you see that with how teams have been drafting recently. You see corners being taken higher and higher in the draft. So I saw you bring that up. What do you think about that?
I think you need your linebackers to be a little bit better in coverage then.
Gotcha.
Like if teams are working on getting the ball out of their hands quicker, can I have like quicker and, better linebackers in coverage? That's in that underneath area where teams might be trying to attack. Do I have a long rangy linebacker that's able to get into that window, or a quick enough linebacker to be able to match up with a tight end or a receiver that might be getting the ball quick? And I think that's why Fred Warner is viewed the way that he is, because he helps with those things. So, and not to say that the secondary doesn't matter even in that sense, but and you do want that. You do want a guy. I could tell last year at times when the 49ers, playing against Buffalo, and it's like, man, no answer for Diggs, right? But having a guy like, you have that main pass rush, and then you have a guy like Fred Warner at linebacker, I think that definitely helps as well.
Yeah, and we got a comment right here. Someone's asking, Who do you think's better, Jason Verrett or Carlos Rogers?
Are we just talking about in general or like as a 49er?
Ooh.
Because in general, it's Jason Verrett. Like, if you talk about
Right.
Verrett before all the injuries and everything, and even last year, but Verrett before the injuries, I mean, he was a top
Oh,
5 to 8 cornerback in the league, and I don't think Carlos Rogers was ever considered that. Now he was solid, but he was a free agent for a reason. And I think even before heading to the 49ers, we're talking about like 0 takeaways in his entire career, something crazy like that. Hit the market, 49ers got him. I thought, again, talked about a great pass rush, elevating maybe the secondary, and how him coming to the 49ers and some of the guys who the 49ers had up front, how Carlos Rogers benefited from having that. I think that helped him more than anything. Verrett's always been a terrific cover guy. So I'm going to go with Verrett in the sense of like just their careers.
Yeah, I know. I think that's definitely like Verrett to me. We saw what he did against DeAndre Hopkins, but even like what you were saying before his injuries, this is a guy who's an elite shutdown type of dude, and he does have that top 5 to 8 ability, like you were talking about. Where, man, I love watching Jason Verrett play. He's really exciting to me to watch, and I think just kind of the last thing I wanted to hit on with this pressure versus coverage thing, and well, let's apply this to the 49ers a little, because I think one thing that I've brought up, I know a lot of people, 49ers media, have brought up, and I kind of asked this about you on one of your videos, was it doesn't seem like the 49ers value corner as much, but just in seeing that Jimmy Ward interview over the weekend, just and understanding the 49ers a little more, it seems like, to me at least, that what they're asking their corners to do, and between Fred Warner and Jimmy Ward and all those other guys who can cover, it doesn't seem like their corners are asked and don't have as much pressure put on them as maybe some other teams might have.
Yeah, and I told you too, like, I want to say that a lot of it has to do with where they are when maybe they're picking, and that could be part of the reason why, the value of that pick, right? Like, I'm not going to prioritize a corner over Kinlaw if I have Kinlaw higher on my board, right? So, maybe they felt like they needed a defensive tackle, and there wasn't a corner that would push them off of that at that moment. So it's kind of hard to say if they prioritize it more. But when you draft Aaron Banks over Asante Samuel Jr. there, then I think you do kind of show your hand a little bit that maybe you are valuing building in the trenches more so than on the outside. So that is something, but shoot, there was 49ers don't value receivers enough to draft a receiver high. Oh, well, you got Brandon Aiuyk, they trade up for him, first round pick, so, I think that you can always say that until you can't. I bet at some point when we least expect it, the 49ers will prove us wrong.
Yeah, I mean, because listen, people have been saying draft a corner for the last 2 years, but who knows? Maybe they might draft a corner with their second round pick next year. And
I didn't think they could last year. Not last year, the year before. I didn't think they could. I didn't think it played out that way. You looked at the 49ers and their cornerback or even just defensive back situation in general. You had Richard Sherman. He was going to start no matter what. He was coming off of an all-pro year. And then you had on the other side, Emmanuel Mosley and Akella Witherspoon, who we were trying to figure out, like, all right, one of these guys is going to take control of that spot. Now, and then you have Verrett that you brought back. Now, do you just draft a corner high, say even if you draft him in the first round, do you draft a corner high in the first round and you're not 100% sure what you have with Akella Witherspoon, who play high at times when healthy, but then other times, we see him be inconsistent. You have Mosley, who made plays in the Super Bowl run. So do you draft somebody first round or even second round and say, you know what, we're just going to play you over these guys? Or are you saying we're going to draft a corner first or second round and not play you until all these other guys leave? So, like, I thought it was a sticky situation, and I could see a scenario where the 49ers didn't take corner at all. I had talked about that, and a lot of people were surprised by that, but I wasn't, just because of how the roster was kind of playing out. We knew what was coming. We knew that the following year everybody was going to be gone, but I just didn't see a scenario where you could draft a corner high on a team that's just come off a Super Bowl and you're trying to repeat, and it's like, oh, well, you're just going to sit this guy. I don't think there's a scenario where we just force him to play, because we don't need to when you have Mosley, Witherspoon, Verrett. So I didn't see them drafting corner last year.
And in that 19 offseason specifically, I think you're right. While there may have been a calling from the fan base, it didn't line up with what the 49ers wanted to do or what options they had. Even looking at that Kinlaw pick specifically, I know people maybe would have wanted a CJ Henderson or a Jeff Okudah, but those guys were picked before him. So that wasn't an option for the 49ers there. And then I don't think you would find any 49er fan now who's saying, oh yeah, don't go pick up Aiyuk. Don't pick him in the first round. I think every 49er fan is very happy with that pick looking back at it now. I think the one that I do have an issue with, though, is the Asante Samuel one, specifically for this reason, is that if we're talking about positional value, and I know what you're saying, which is that you just got to pick the best player, and regardless of need or stuff like that, you should try and zone in on who the best guy is. But gosh, with Aaron Banks and Asante Samuel, I felt like after Asante Samuel this year, there was a huge drop off in the draft with corner. I felt like he was kind of the last guy in that tier, whereas it was the opposite, I feel like, with Aaron Banks, where he was at the top of that tier of interior guards, linemen, and that sort of thing, where, you saw Trey Sermon picked, I think it was picked 88 in the third round, right? There were still a lot of interior guys like I believe Creed Humphrey and the kid out of the third round pick, the kid who I can't, or not the Division III kid out of Wisconsin Whitewater, whose name I can't
shows
remember.
his belly all the time. Yeah.
Right. But I felt like in that third round, there were all those sorts of kind of guys. Whereas if the 49ers did want to take a corner like they did with Ambry Thomas, that's kind of where I have an issue with that sort of thing, where I feel like they might have dropped the ball a little bit with Asante Samuel Jr. But hey, maybe I'm overreacting. I think, listen, I do believe in Aaron Banks. It's not about that. It's just, to me, you got to play the game a little smarter, especially with how many guys that the 49ers are going to be losing over the next 2 years in that secondary. I would have liked to see more consistency. But then again, I mean, all offseason, people were talking about, oh, how are they going to replace this spot on the offensive line? What about Mike McGlinchey?
Right.
All this other stuff. And they do address that issue. So, on the one hand, you I don't want to say you ignore one issue, but you don't address it. But then on the other, you're filling another spot. So you gotta pick and choose. And I guess I know you scouted Ambry Thomas. We can kind of just end on this because I know we've been talking about this for a while. But with Ambry Thomas, he's someone I haven't gotten a great feel for yet. I've tried to kind of find what I can with him, but I know you've scouted him a little bit. So what do you see from Ambry, and what kind of potential do you think he has?
Yeah, he's an extremely sound press corner. I think even when he's playing zone, he likes to play it from a press alignment. And it was interesting because I think that was the opposite of what we've seen from 49ers cornerbacks on a consistent basis, right? Like they'll play press, definitely for sure. But they also play a good amount of off coverage as well. And I think with a lot of these guys, you're able to see them off, like even like a Diamador Lenore. You can see him play a lot of off coverage and see how he moves in space and stuff. And it was a little bit harder to find those reps, at least last year, from Ambry Thomas. Now, he did a lot of things very well. I thought he was extremely smart. Saw plays where he was getting everybody lined up and then still doing his job. I thought his patience at the line of scrimmage with his feet and being able to get hands-on was terrific. So I thought his, vertical speed, being able to run downfield with guys was really good. I saw Chase Claypool make a couple of catches downfield on him, but both of them, it had to be like perfect throw and catch, and at least in the location. I thought he made those guys work extremely hard when they did catch the ball downfield on them. So, it wasn't like he was a guy out there just getting whooped everywhere. Now, watching him the year before in the bowl game against Alabama, that was tough. It was a tough job. It was tough for him, and you could just see it in space against Devontae Smith, even whether they threw the ball to Devontae Smith or not, just what it looked like. And I like to watch guys away from the ball. Like, when they're not throwing you the ball, how do you look in coverage? And you could tell that Devontae Smith presented a big-time challenge for him, as he did everybody, right? I mean,
right.
Derek Stingley's probably going to be a first-round corner next year, maybe the first corner off the board, and Devontae Smith destroyed him 2 years in a row. So, I mean, it's hard to kind of put that on him, but just in the sense of his movement skills and what it looked like, you could see it possibly being an issue against Devontae Smith, and that might be something as well as an issue at the NFL level, potentially.
Yeah, well, and with Thomas specifically, I know the one thing that I was talking about earlier with kick return, punt return. He's a guy who was doing a lot of that sort of stuff at Michigan. So, what did you see from him in special teams? Do you think he has any potential in the NFL for that?
Yeah, sometimes guys, I mean, shoot, you're a third round pick. Like, you want to be active, you want to be on the roster. Like, you're going to have to make some noise on special teams somewhere. 49ers didn't really get a whole lot out of Richie James. Obviously, he had some moments, but on a consistent basis was a little underwhelming as a return guy. I had a few good returns, but for the most part, underwhelming. And now it's like, well, who else do you have that's really going to return? You talked about Brandon Aiuyk potentially being that guy. I'd say with a guy who you're banking on being like a top receiver, and with the issues that the 49ers have had injury-wise at receiver position, you probably don't want to put him back there too much. Maybe in a key situation, which I think I saw them do like once or twice last year. But on a consistent basis, you're going to have to try to figure out who can be that return guy. And I think Ambry Thomas will definitely be a guy that gets a crack at it, because I don't know if he's going to be a starter day one. I'd assume it's going to be Verrett and Mosley out there. And if Ambry Thomas wants to suit up on game day, it's going to have to be because, well, I can return punts and kicks.
Right. Well, and I think with the special team thing too, and you kind of hit on this, it was so underwhelming for the team. Like, I talk about Aiyuk getting more returns, but in general, this team just, they need to, I feel like we see it all the time in the NFL where teams can literally win a game 2 or 3 throughout the season because they get a great return or there's a great special teams play made. And I just don't know if we've seen any of that from the 49ers in this past 4 years. So like you're saying, it has been really underwhelming. And I don't feel like they've tapped into the full potential of a guy like Aiyuk, who, I think there is some merit to what you're saying, how they shouldn't play him too much. But even within that, man, just get him 4, 5, 6 returns, something like that, to where we were talking about earlier, you just want to get the ball in his hands more. So if it's in a key moment or something like that, yeah, that could be really cool to take advantage of. And Deebo could have some of that potential too. But like you were saying, if Ambry Thomas can do it, if another rookie or another Richie James can do it, that's much better for the 49ers than putting those Aiyuks and Deebos in the position where you can get them hurt more.
Right. So. And I see somebody say, yeah, it's like playing Russian roulette. And yeah, man, I mean, injuries happen in football. So, I mean, it can happen on the punt return. It can happen on you catching a 5-yard slant, right?
I was about to say with Aiyuk, those suicide slants that people were putting up on Twitter, man, some of that's scary to look at with Aiyuk sometimes, man.
It can happen, but, you want to limit just the opportunity of people just being able to tee off on your guy. And on punt returns, kick returns, guys are just going to be running full speed into your guy. And with the 49ers injury luck, you probably want to try to limit the opportunity of a guy just really getting blasted, as much as you can. So, here and there, put him back there, punt returns, give him that opportunity. But I wouldn't have Aiyuk as my primary return guy. And we saw that with other guys. I mean, Odell Beckham.
Right. Antonio Brown. I mean,
Antonio Brown, especially early on, he was like the primary return guy. You have why am I drawing blanks on guys right now?
Tyler Lockett is a guy who was returning kicks a lot early on, and I feel like now I might be wrong.
Des Bryant was a guy who was extremely explosive coming out of Oklahoma State, and they would put him back there at punt return, and he would crib some punt returns as well. So you see it in spots, but I don't even think Des Bryant was like the primary return guy.
Right. Yeah. No, I think you're right on that. The thing with Aiyuk too, it's just, I think people saw it so much from him in college. It's just like, man, he just needs to get the ball more. But I mean, I guess with Aiyuk overall, I just love watching him play, and I'd love to see him get more involvement in any ways. But we went a little over today, Croc, man. I really do appreciate your time. This is so much fun getting to talk to you. I know I learned so much just in this conversation. I hope the people at home did too. Just before we get out of here, I got all your stuff linked below. Is there anything you want to plug for the people that you haven't already? Anything you got coming up that people should be looking out for?
Oh, yeah. So first and foremost, as 49er fans, you guys all check out the podcast with Brian Peacock and myself, Locked On 49ers, which is currently, thanks to you guys, the #1 football podcast on the network. I think since I joined June 1st, since then, it's been the #1 football program on the podcast network the entire time. #3 podcast on the entire network, which probably, I'm guessing, should shoot up to #1 once football season comes. So that's something that's really exciting. And Peacock and I'm we come from two different kind of backgrounds with this stuff, right? Like, I mean, I started talking about sports just because I love talking football and stuff, but I didn't go to school for it or anything like that. So there's still elements of it that I'm learning and understanding how to not ramble as much, especially having a podcast with Peacock where, it's a little bit more structured. And, we try to keep it between 30, 35 minutes. We typically go over a little bit, but probably due to a lot of my long-winded answers. So, there's a lot of areas where I can improve, learning how to work off of him. But those are things that we will get together. But right now, it's definitely doing really good. So if you guys aren't already, listen to Locked On 49ers, and we'll continue to get in the groove in the sense of how we work together. And then obviously we have Crock Talk TV. So you guys can subscribe to my Crock Talk TV podcast. That's something that I've started to kind of build up, and I'm trying to figure out, like, I wanted it to be a wide receiver and defensive back based podcast, right? That's what I wanted.
Right.
And I've noticed my numbers are drastically different when I'm talking about 49er stuff in comparison to when I'm talking about another player on a different team or whatnot. So I think I'm gonna take it to it being more of a 49ers YouTube channel, but I'm still going to focus more on just receivers and defensive backs. So I will probably touch on some things, but obviously I'll leave a lot of those texts to Locked On 49ers. But receivers and defensive backs, film breakdown, things like that, I think I'm going to do that with my Crock Talk Patreon. Crock Talk TV on the YouTube. And then I have my Patreon account, patreon.com/Crock Talk. So you guys can subscribe to that. Will be a lot of analysis on college players and things like that coming out. So yeah, a lot of stuff, man. I appreciate all y'all for rocking with me.
Yeah, and all that stuff is linked below. I gotta especially throw out there the Locked On podcast. I was listening to that over the weekend more and more. Once I saw you were on it, I know you're on it now, and I was listening to the one you guys did today and yesterday. I really enjoyed it. I highly recommend it for any 49ers fans. And hey, he's saying he hates that they're only 30 minutes, but man, you know what? I'll give you guys a pass. You're doing every single day 49ers content right now. I think more than 30 minutes at this time of the offseason would be a huge ask for
well,
anyone.
That's not why they do it like that. So the people have come in and told us that a lot of people listen to podcasts on their commutes. So the average listening span is 28 minutes.
Gotcha.
So that's the average time that people listen to a podcast. So they try not to go too far over that. Yeah, I didn't know that, but I learn something new every day.
Well, and hey, if people are complaining about the length, they can go to your YouTube channel and see you talk even more. And I highly recommend that too. I've been learning a lot from that. And just for everybody, I'll be on Jay and the Bay's channel later today. I'll put out a tweet for that so everybody can check that out. I have some more plans in the future. But hey, thank you to Crock. I love listening to your content, man. I love learning from you. So I'm glad I got to get you on here today and just pick apart everything I wanted to. I had a great time. I hope the people enjoyed this as well. Thanks for your time, man. I'll be back on later this week, everybody, sometime. I don't know exactly when. I'll put out a tweet for that. I'm looking at Thursday right now, but I'll let you all know soon enough. Thanks again, Crock. Everybody have a great Tuesday. And hey, I'll end it on this. Suns in 5.